Coming in at number 10, we have Homo Heidelbergensis, also known as Heidelberg Man. This extinct human ancestor walked the earth about 600,000 years ago in Africa, parts of Asia, and Europe. They are believed to be the direct ancestors of Neanderthals, and some archaeologists even argue that they are archaic or early Neanderthals. Heidelberg Man was an exceptionally tall ancient man. They hunted and butchered large prey, and may be the first species of Homo to intentionally bury their dead. I wonder what those funerals must have been like. It was like Glue Perp was a very fast runner, but he wasn't so fast that he didn't get mauled by a saber-toothed tiger. And now let's move on before the same thing happens to all of us. At number 9, we have Homo rudolphinus. This extinct human ancestor is only known through a small number of fossil bone fragments. There have been some debate on whether or not Rudolphinus is the earliest known member of the Homo genus or is a very late member of the Australopithecus genus. Due to the scant nature of the remains, not much is known about the species, but evidence suggests that the brains were proportionately larger than the other earliest members of the Homo genus. These guys were huge eggheads. No wonder they didn't make it for a very long time. I don't think nerds would have fared well before laws were invented. Well, they did have laws back then. It was just who could punchy punch the bestie best. Next up at number 8 is Java Man. This early human was actually made up of 80% coffee, and that's how it got its name. And the reason it went extinct was because it was brewed to death. That's a stupid dad joke, and hopefully you didn't believe that because I just made that up. But this next part is true. In the early 1890s, the tooth and skull cap and thigh bone of an extinct human species were found by a team of archaeologists in East Java. That's what gave this discovery the nickname Java Man. It was a big deal at the time, as the bones at that point were the oldest known hominid ever discovered. It was originally argued by some archaeologists that Java Man was the ancestor of Homo erectus, but there were some who said that it was the so-called missing link between ape and man. Coming in hot at number 7 on this list is Homo denisova. One of the more recent discoveries of an extinct human species was made in the Denisova cave in Siberia as recent as 2008. Only very few remains have been discovered so far, but thanks to advanced DNA analysis, it has been possible to sequence the genome of Homo denisova. It has been possible to show that some people in Tibet have snippets of Denisovian DNA, the same way that some Europeans have tiny percentages of Neanderthal DNA. Coming in at number 6, we're bringing you Pengu Man. He was made out of clay, and his mother beats him with a frying pan, while everyone in his life is extremely volatile. If you don't understand that reference, I feel very sorry for you. Another extinct human found in 2008 was Homo Heidelbergensis. If you can't say that name, just call him the catchier nickname Pengu Man. I struggle with that every single time. Pengu Man's fossilized mandible was discovered by fishermen working near Pengu Islands off the coast of Taiwan. It is extremely thick and has gigantic teeth, which puzzled scientists for several reasons. They were like, how did a creature that didn't have access to a high-carb diet and squats get so thick? I'm just kidding on that one. They have been able to determine that it was the mandible of a previously unknown species, and that it was probably very similar to Homo erectus, but larger. It has so far not been possible to date this fossil, so they are not sure when the species was alive, but finding this incredibly strange fossil with very little to compare it to, it is clear that it doesn't exist anymore. Thankfully. We are at the halfway point of this list, and for number 5, we are at Dmanisi Man. Homo georgicus, otherwise known as Dmanisi Man, is a species of extinct human which has been found in Dmanisi, Georgia. The species has a very small brain, unlike many of our extinct ancestors. The 5 skulls, which are evidence of Homo georgicus, were discovered in 1991, and since then they've been subject to much debate. They may have been an intermediary between Homo erectus and Homo habilis, but there are some scientists who think their skulls are simply examples of Homo erectus. Despite having small brains, the fossils are associated with a total of 73 tools, which proves that a large brain is not always necessary to use tools. Although I would not want to be around the dude who has a small brain and a bunch of tools. He's either going to do a terrible job fixing your car, or he's going to be rooting around your insides before you have the chance to introduce yourself. Coming in at number 4, we have the Red Deer Cave People, the most recently known archaic human to go extinct. The remains of the Red Deer Cave People have been dated approximately 11,500 years ago, meaning they were still around about 28,500 years after the last pure Neanderthal. Some scientists think the Red Deer Cave People were a hybrid of Homo denisova and modern humans, but attempts to sequence their DNA have not proved successful, so it's currently impossible to say for sure. We're finally down to the top 3 here of the most amazing top 10 list of scary extinct human species, and now we have Homo naledi. Evidence of Homo naledi was unearthed in 2013 in a cave in South Africa by cavers who were able to access a chamber in the Rising Star cave system for the very first time. 30 meters down, or 90 98 feet below the surface, it's strewn with thousands of bones which have unique and interesting features, with 1,550 currently excavated and many more remaining in the cave. Some of their features are archaic and resembling specimens from 20 million years ago, but they also have more modern hominin features, and their bones have been dated about 250,000 years ago. It has been concluded that they are not direct ancestors of modern humans. Coming in at number 2 on the list, we have the Hobbit. In 2004, researchers made an announcement that a discovery had been made on the island of Flores, Indonesia. The people on the island had long talked about Ubu Gogo, a race of short-haired hairy men who lived in the caves. Astonishingly, the discovery of stone tools and the remains of a small hominid in the cave on the island seemed to prove the legend right. The official name was Homo Florensiensis, after the island, but they have become known as the Hobbit. Homo Florensiensis was approximately 3.5 feet tall with large feet. The Hobbit had very primitive features and a small brain, like our earliest Australopithecus ancestors, but they were able to use tools and also may have been able to hunt and use fire. Using fire back then must have made you the biggest badass of all time. You could just wave it around and everyone would have thought you were a god, and they would have for sure thought you could just like dance really cool or something like that would go along with the fire. And the moment you've all been waiting for, we are at number 1 on our list, and for number 1 we have the ghost ancestor. A study published in 2019 has shared evidence of yet an undiscovered extinct human ancestor proposed after an AI program determined that there was a ghost population of archaic humans which interbred with modern humans in the distant past. Researchers think the unknown ancestor may have been an offshoot of Homo denisova based on the evidence. With new techniques such as this, and advances in fields such as DNA analysis, it is now possible to learn more about extinct species of human than ever before. New species are being discovered and identified with relative frequency, and the earliest discoveries can now be reassessed and analyzed with greater detail. The evidence is pointing not to one unbroken chain of human ancestors, but a rich family tree and a number of offshoots. Exactly how many extinct relatives we have we will probably never know for sure, but with each discovery we are able to add new unique pieces to the puzzle of who we are. But wait, that's not all that we have for you on today's top 10 list, guys. People living today who are in Europe, Asia, and Eurasia have well-defined Neanderthal-derived segments in their genome. These fragments are traces of interbreeding that followed the out-of-Africa human migration dating about 60,000 years ago. They imply that children born with Neanderthal modern human pairings outside of Africa were raised among the modern human and ultimately bred with other humans, explaining how bits of Neanderthal DNA remain in the human genome. The plot thickens. Are previous human species embedded within us somehow? Did we evolve from so-called extinct species that I just presented you with? If you weren't scared listening before, then you might be a little bit scared right now.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Homo habilis. Alright, starting off this list, we have the Homo habilis, which is said to translate to meaning handyman. This is a species of humans that evolved in Africa sometime prior to 2 million years ago, so clearly quite some time ago. It is believed that Homo habilis went extinct about 1.5 million years ago. By the middle of the 20th century, it was starting to be accepted that humans first evolved in Africa from an early group of hominins known as Australopiths. Back in 1960, however, a research team in Tanzania found fossils that would sort of confirm this in a way. This fossil was one that sort of fell in the gap between Australopiths and humans as we know them. It was the discovery of Homo habilis, the first true human species to evolve. From what has been found, which is mostly fragmentary fossils, it has been determined that H. habilis seemed to have a brain that was significantly larger than Australopiths and more similar to later human species. It is believed that H. habilis behaved in a human way, like they made stone tools, which at the time was thought to be different than their previous ancestors. This is exactly part of the reason they were named handyman, but at this point in time we now know that Australopiths also made tools, but the name of H. habilis still stands, and they are very important in the course of our evolution. In our number 9 spot today we have Homo Antecessor. The discovery of this species starts out at a huge archaeological site in Spain called the Gran Dolina Cave. This cave has a rich history, but as relates to this list, at this site there has been found the remains of a hominin group called Homo Antecessor. This discovery came in 1997, and this species is often described as having a mix of modern and quote primitive traits. It was thought that there were similarities with this species between both other species like Neanderthals, but also with Homo sapiens. This was able to be confirmed through DNA sequencing, or really a study of ancient proteins that were extracted from dental enamel of one of the fossils. They were also able to prove that this species was a closely related or sister lineage to modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, which shows that they all must have shared some common ancestor. In our number 8 spot today we have Homo naledi. Also called the Star Man, this species certainly was an interesting one as they had quite an unusual mix of features. It is said that parts of their skeletons would be indistinguishable from modern humans, but there were other parts that seemed almost, quote, ape-like. This species also had a brain that was only slightly larger than a chimpanzee, but they were still capable of sophisticated and more modern human-like behavior. No one is exactly sure when these guys existed or when exactly they went extinct, and it isn't quite clear where they sit in the evolutionary tree, but some experts believed that they may have lived at the same time as H. habilis we already talked about. They believed that they probably went extinct more than 1 million years ago after being outcompeted by later species like H. erectus. There are others who don't agree with this, however, and who believed that this species lived much more recently, but then that begs the question as to how humans who looked so primitive could have survived until so recently. In our number 7 spot today we have Homo erectus. As I just mentioned in the last point, we have Homo erectus, or the upright man. It is thought that this human species also evolved in Africa, this time somewhere around 2 million years ago, and they went on to quickly expand and spread throughout Eurasia. At this point in time it is debated exactly when this species went extinct, but it is believed to be around 143,000 years ago. While this species isn't the most well known, they are extremely important to our evolution. They looked like and behaved in similar ways to us, and they were the earliest known human species to have migrated long distances, which is not only an exceptional feat, but also really important to our world today. It is believed that this might be the earliest known species who was able to learn how to control fire, and also quite possibly the first to cook their foods. This opened the way for a better diet with improved nutrition, which then paved the way for the evolution of a larger and more demanding brain. In our number 6 spot today we have Homo Neanderthalensis. We are talking about the most well-known extinct human species now, the Neanderthals. How well known they are might be contributed to the fact that they were the first ancient human species to be discovered by scientists around 200 years ago. Neanderthals were thought to have first appeared in Eurasia about 200,000 years ago, and they lived until somewhere around 40,000 years ago. It is often said that Neanderthals are like a cousin of us Homo sapiens, and that we share some sort of similar parent species with them. Despite these similarities, it isn't exactly clear when the split from the line happened between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, but some believe it may have been over 1 million years ago. Neanderthals are known for their sophisticated tools made from stone and bones, and it is thought that they might have taken advantage of fires that were caused by lightning, which showed that they were, of course, also able to control fire. It is thought that Neanderthals also practiced self-medication and that they made art, which only suggests that they might have been more cognitively advanced than people once believed. In our number 5 spot today we have the Homo Longi. This species is one of the most recently proposed hominin species, and they are thought to have originated in China. The skull that led to the discovery of this species was first found in the 1930s, but it wasn't until recently that it was made available for scientific study and analysis. The skull is thought to have come from about 146,000 years ago, and with this new information, it is thought that this skull might have brought forward a quote long lost sister lineage of Homo sapiens. The eye sockets of this skull are said to be large and blocky, the molars are much larger than ours would be, and the brow ridge is said to be quite sizable. These are all considered primitive traits, but what's not primitive is the size of the brain, which is completely comparable to modern humans. This discovery is one that just reminds us how difficult it is to designate a new species with such limited resources available in terms of evidence. At this point in time it isn't exactly clear where they fit in on the evolutionary tree, but it certainly is quite interesting, and it reminds us how complicated human evolution really is. In our number 4 spot today we have Homo Rudolfensis. So this is a species that has very little evidence. Really just a single specimen. A skull. This specimen, also referred to as KNMER1470, is believed to have come from about 1.9 million years ago, and it was found in what was once known as Kubifora, but it is now Kenya. The skull was originally thought to be from the species H. habilis, the one we started this list with, but there were a few problems with this classification. Firstly, the brain case of the skull was quite big. H. habilis had brains around 500 cubic centimeters, but this brain case would have allowed for a brain the size of 700 cubic centimeters. This skull also had large teeth and a smaller brow ridge than what would have been seen on the skull of an H. habilis. This is exactly why experts concluded that this skull belonged to a previously unknown species, even accounting for the differences that might have been seen between males and females. That is exactly why this separate species was designated back in 1986. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Denisovans. So this is a group that was discovered in a completely different way than the other species on this list. For most of the other species, we found fossils or remains that showed their distinct differences from other species, and these discoveries gave us very valuable insights into what their lives might have been like and around when they lived, but the discovery of these guys, we have little to no information on their skeletons, their appearance, or how they behaved, but we still know of their existence, and that's all thanks to DNA and genetics information. So basically, researchers found fragments of teeth and bones that were 50,000 years old in a cave in Siberia. Based on their age and the location they were found, everyone just assumed that the DNA extracted from them would match Neanderthals, but that did not happen. Instead, when they were tested in 2010, it was discovered that these bones belonged to a human species that is estimated to have last shared an ancestor with Neanderthals about 765,000 years ago. Right now, this species hasn't been given a scientific name, and this reluctance is due to the fact that so little is known about them. Through more research though, which is of course currently ongoing, it is thought that they might be formally recognized as a species or subspecies Homo denisova. In our number 2 spot today, we have Homo Florensiensis. This species is honestly a bit of an evolutionary mystery or puzzle that is super interesting. It is believed that they lived on the Indonesian island of Flores sometime between 100,000 to 50,000 years ago, but it is also believed that ancestors of this species might have been present on the island at least 700,000 years ago. The puzzling part comes in when we talk about their appearance because it's just so different from ours. They wouldn't have stood over 3 feet tall, they had short bodies, super long feet, and a very small brain. This wouldn't have been all that strange when it came to the earliest human species like H. habilis, when that species was wandering around Africa over 2 million years ago, but we are talking about a species that lives thousands of kilometers away and that was only alive 50,000 years ago. They're also thought to have behaved in a similar way to other early humans, like with the ability to control fire, cook food, that sort of thing. That is exactly why experts aren't quite sure how H. Florensiensis fits into the evolutionary tree, but it is possible that they might have found themselves stranded on this island, and that is the cause for their hugely different evolutionary path. In our number 1 spot today, we have Homo Luzonensis. Another island-dwelling population, this species was discovered on the island of Luzon in the Philippines, and it is thought that they lived there around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago. This species was discovered through just 13 bones from teeth, fingers, toes, and a femur that were found on the island. These remains belonged to 3 different individuals, but they gave us an incredibly valuable insight into this previously unknown species. In 2019, it was determined that these bones were different enough from the other known past human species that they were then classified into their own new species category. It is crazy to think that it's still so recently that we are discovering brand new species that are so important to the history of humans and how we got here today. It is said that the toe and finger bones of this species are quite interesting as they are slightly curved, which is a feature that is shared by living species of tree-dwelling primates. It is thought that this may suggest that for H. luzonensis, living in trees might have still been a part of their lifestyle. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have Australopithecus Afarensis. Back in 1965, a research team led by Brian Patterson found a single arm bone of an early human at a site which was located in northern Kenya. This was an amazing find, but without additional human fossils, they were unable to identify exactly which species it belonged to. Skip to 1994 and another research team at the same site were able to find numerous teeth and bone fragments, and through these additional samples they were able to determine that these were fossils of a very primitive hominin, and they were able to name a new species. This species had a combination of traits that can be found in both apes as well as humans. The upper end of the tibia or the shin bone shows us signs that it is likely that this species was able to walk on 2 feet. Because of the long forearms and certain features that were found in the wrist bones, it is also suggested that this species likely climbed trees as well. Based on their jaws and teeth, we think that they were likely plant eaters in general, and that their diet mostly consisted of fruits and nuts. In our number 9 spot today, we have Australopithecus Afarensis. I actually had never learned of this species before researching for this video, but it turns out that this is one of the longest lived and best known early human species, as researchers have been able to uncover the remains of more than 300 individuals. It is said that this species was first seen somewhere between 3.85 and 2.95 million years ago, and that they survived for an impressive 900,000 years, which is 4 times longer than we as Homo sapiens have been around. More similar to chimpanzees than modern humans, the children of this species grew quite rapidly after birth, and they reached adulthood faster than we do, which means that they likely had less time for parental guidance and socialization. This species had both human and ape-like characteristics. They had more ape-like face proportions and a brain case for a brain 1/3 the size of a modern human brain. They had long, strong arms and curved fingers, which showed that they must have climbed trees. This ability to live both on the ground and in trees is likely what helped them to survive for almost a million years through climate and environmental changes. In our number 8 spot today, we have Paranthropus Platyops. Sorry, I don't speak Latin. This is one of the more mysterious early human species, as there is still so much we don't know about them. What we do know is that they lived in Kenya about 3.5 million years ago, and that they lived at the same time as Australopithecus Afarensis we just talked about. Despite them living at the same time, however, this species had smaller molars, which researchers believe reflects a different diet. This means that these two species likely did not have to compete for food. There are some people who believe that us as Homo sapiens are related to this species because of their facial features that are more similar to modern humans compared to the faces of other human species that existed at the time. Not everyone in the scientific community is convinced yet, but hopefully once more specimens and fossils are found, we will be able to get a solid answer. This species remains the only one in their genus, with their name translating to flat-faced from Kenya. In our number 7 spot today, we have Australopithecus Africanus. This is a species of early human that does have similarity to others on this list, with a mix of human and ape-like features. Compared to some of the others, however, this species had a rounder cranium that held a larger brain, and they also had smaller teeth. The remains found of this species signify that they did walk on 2 legs, but their arms and hands show that they were also still climbing at this time in the evolution of humans. This species had males that grew to be about 4 feet and 6 inches, while the females grew to be about 3 feet 9 inches. For a while, it was believed that this might be one of the first human species that hunted animals because of the fact that many of the remains were found among broken animal bones, teeth, and horns. But it was later realized that both these animals and this early human species were just victims of the same predators: lions, leopards, and hyenas. It is now believed that the diet of this species was similar to that of chimpanzees, with fruits, plants, nuts and seeds, roots, insects, and eggs being their main source of food. In our number 6 spot today, we have Paranthropus Aethiopicus. In 1967, the existence of this species was first proposed by a team of French paleontologists who had discovered a toothless mandible that was thought to differ from the other early human species that were known at the time. Many people kind of brushed it off to the side because of the fact that it seemed a little too early to name an entirely different species based on one incomplete mandible. Flash forward to 1985, however, and we have the discovery of what is known as the Black Skull. Found just west of Lake Turkana in Kenya, this skull confirmed what those who discovered that jawbone had thought. This skull had a dark color to it from the minerals in the soil that were absorbed by the skull as it fossilized, and it was able to show a species that had a mix of both derived and primitive traits. This is when we confirmed the past existence of this new species, dating back to at least 2.5 million years ago in Eastern Africa. In our number 5 spot today, we have Australopithecus gari. With a name that translates to surprise, this species definitely wasn't one that researchers expected to find. This is quite a mysterious species, with much of what they and their lives were like remaining hidden in the past, but what we do know is that this might have been one of the first human species to use stone tools. And it doesn't stop there. While fossils of this species are associated with or were found with some of the earliest known stone tools, they were also found along with animal bones that were cut and broken open with the tools. This may mean that this species was also among the first to have a diet that included meat and bone marrow from large animals. That is a huge moment in terms of human history. I mean, it likely changed the development of humans as a whole. This species is believed to have lived about 2.5 million years ago, and some experts believe that they may be an ancestor of ours. In our number 4 spot today, we have Paranthropus Paranthropus boisei. This is a species that is said to have lived somewhere around 2.3 to 1.2 million years ago. Like others in this genus, they are said to be characterized by a special skull that was adapted for more heavy chewing. This adaptation is seen in the appearance of this species, as they had much wider faces and molars and premolars that are about 4 times the size of modern humans. They also had the thickest dental enamel of any known early human, which I guess is a fun fact you can use the next time somebody asks you. Because of their appearance and these features, researchers speculate that this species had a bit of a rough diet. Experts believe that while when they could, they likely ate many fruits and plants, when they had to, they also had the ability to resort to tough roots and nuts. While this species lived for quite some time on this planet and coexisted with other early human species, most experts agree that they are not in the ancestral line that led to us modern humans. In our number 3 spot today, we have Australopithecus Sediba. This species is an important one when it comes to us because some suggest that looking at the remains and fossils we have of them may just give us valuable insight into the origins and the ancestor of the genus Homo, which is what we are. We don't really know our family tree, so to speak, all the way from the first early human species, so this might just give us some clues that can help figure it out. Said to have lived between 1.97 and 1.98 million years ago, this species has traits that are similar to some of the other earlier human species we talked about, but also some traits that are more similar to us. Remains of this species show us that it is likely that walking on 2 feet was probably their most usual form of movement. This was mostly seen in changes to the pelvis, which shows us that this is one of the first things that really changed when it came to early humans evolving these more modern traits. What is peculiar, however, is that there is also evidence that this species walked in a completely different way than any other species before it. It is said that they walked on 2 feet, but each step they had their foot turned inward with the weight focused on the outer edge of their foot. This shows us that it might be likely that the way we walk evolved through a bunch of different paths, which is kinda cool. In our number 2 spot today, we have Paranthropus robustus. Back in 1938, scientist Robert Broom bought a fossil jaw fragment and molar that was said to belong to a previously known early human species. When he examined these specimens, however, he felt as though they were different from any of the other he had seen in his career. This led to him taking a trip to South Africa to explore the site they were said to have come from. Here, he collected many more bones and teeth, and he was able to discover this previously unknown species with a name that translates to beside man. Said to have lived 1.8 to 1.2 million years ago, this species still remains much of a mystery. Scientists still aren't exactly sure which other human species this one evolved from, but what we do know about them is one of their practices that they had with the use of bone tools. With these tools, there has been evidence found that this species liked to dig into termite mounds. Researchers are trying to find out if this practice was more regional or if it was shared across the entire species. In our number 1 spot today, we have Homo Heidelbergensis. In 1908 in Germany, a workman discovered a jawbone that was nearly complete with the exception of the missing premolars and the first 2 left molars. With more examination, it was realized that this was the discovery of an entirely new species. This early human species had a very large brow ridge and a large brain case. They also had a flatter face than other early human species, but perhaps the most interesting thing about them is that they are the first known human species to live in a colder climate. This species is said to have had short, wide bodies that were likely an evolutionary adaptation to conserve heat. Dated back to about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago, this species lived at the time that we know as the earliest example of when human species were able to control fire, as well as the earliest known use of wooden spears. This is also said to have been the first known human species to routinely hunt large animals. Another remarkable feat of this species is that they were the first to build shelters, as they created little dwellings made from wood and rock. It is unclear exactly how they used these dwellings, but they changed the course of history with this new ground.